No matter the pain we feel, there is no justification for more violence and disorder.
Can he take some action, end this divisive practice of two-tier policing and make sure that all British citizens are treated the same?
I'm really shocked that he pretends to have respect for Henry's family. Exploiting this tragedy to create grievance and division would be wrong in any circumstances, but to do it when the family are expressly saying, please don't, is unforgivable.
The silence of what Farage didn't say in the Commons today really struck me.
Well,
he
did not
condemn
the violence. He did not condemn, and that speaks volumes.
You don't treat everybody the same. That's the whole point. Farage is wrong in what he's accusing police and others of doing.
Nigel Farage had called for pure cold rage about the murder of Henry Nowak. Here's what that looked like in the Commons today.
The anger that you saw spilling out in Southampton last night, and which is in danger,
condemn the violence,
which is in danger of getting considerably worse, because if the public lose trust,
condemn it.
if the public lose trust in being treated fairly by the police, can he take some action, end this divisive practice of two-tier policing and make sure that all British citizens are treated the same?
This was the violence he was being asked to condemn. 11 officers and a police dog were hurt, 2 people were arrested. But no, Farage would not condemn it. Did he play a part in inciting it, though? It's a question I put to his sidekick, Zia Yusuf, on last night's show before the disorder erupted. Have a look. I'm asking you if Nigel Farage suggesting to people that they feel cold, pure cold rage, is that inciting people to feel anger?
Well, Cathy, you have not answered my question, which is what emotion did you feel having watched that body cam footage?
I'm interviewing you, so I would like you to ask that question. Is that incitement or not? It's simple.
OK, well, I will tell you, having watched that footage myself, I was furious about it.
Today, STARMER denied Farage's accusations of two-tier policing, though he acknowledged officers had serious questions to answer.
But no matter the pain we feel, there is no justification for more violence and disorder. The attacks directed towards police officers in Southampton last night were disgraceful and completely unacceptable. This is a time for serious work, not rage. Henry's life has been stolen. His family have responded with incredible and immense dignity. We must not allow this tragedy to be hijacked by anyone who seeks to divide us.
It was another boy, another tragedy, the racially motivated murder of black student Stephen Lawrence in 1993 that started the police on a journey to try to correct decades of racism. When the official inquiry reported 6 years later, the then Labour Home Secretary Jack Straw was clear it must be a watershed for the whole of society.
The inquiry found that on this definition, and again I quote, institutional racism exists within both the Metropolitan Police Service and in other police services and other institutions countrywide.
The irrevocable change he called for culminated years later in anti-racism guidance to the police. Now, under pressure from the right and an acknowledgement from the left of clumsy wording, it's being reviewed. This afternoon, Stephen Lawrence's mother, Doreen, now Baroness Lawrence, made this intervention in the House of Lords.
When my son was murdered, there was nobody standing up and asking for judgment to happen for him. And the mere fact that the leader of the opposition in the other place can use my son's name in referring to reform, it took 20 years and more for anybody to understand the murder of my son and to have anybody convicted. I am really pleased for the Nowak family that they managed to get those convictions for those ones was caused the murder of their son. So for those in this house also to talk about race equality, they have no idea what race equality means.
This has become an ugly political row, and it's one it may suit Farage to have. On social media, selective quotes and misinformation swirl around, amplified by algorithms devised by tech tycoons on the other side of the world. Now it's spilled out onto the streets of Southampton. Here in Westminster, Farage is assailed on all sides. But does his language of white grievance tap into public anger in the country at large? His party might get an answer to that in the election in Makerfield later this month. Well, Hampshire's Chief Constable has been speaking to Sky's home editor, Jason Farrell, who's been in Southampton today. And just to warn you, his report does contain footage of the moment of Henry's arrest, which you may find distressing.
You've been stabbed? Whereabouts? Don't think you have, mate.
The police officers on the scene made a dreadful mistake, not believing Henry Nowak had been stabbed. But does it speak to a wider problem which some have described as anti-white policing? Did accusations of racism by the killer Vikram Digwar impact on the actions of officers at the scene? The victim's father had this message.
We do not want his death to be used to create further division, hatred or tension. We want his story to make our streets safer for everyone.
But that wasn't respected on the streets of Southampton.
It was just carnage, really, for 4 hours. Bricks were being thrown, a bin was set on fire and pushed through the police line. Bottles, cans.
And the violence has left people in the Sikh community fearful.
Of course, it's raised community tensions. Here, it's raising community tensions throughout the country. There's particular individuals that are looking to penalise entire communities who are really scared and worried right now. We've seen a rise in hate crime, particularly anti-Sikh hate crime at the moment. What I'm calling for is calm and unity, and that is what community leaders all want in Southampton and what we're working towards.
Nigel Farage said this about the way police responded to the fatal stabbing.
I suggest the rest of us respond to this with pure, cold rage.
The Reform leader wrote in the Telegraph of anti-white prejudice that has been allowed to fester.
You'll have seen the headlines about the way in which this is being reported, and some of it is blaming Hampshire's diversity, equality and inclusion training. It's talking about policing being anti-white. What do you say to those criticisms?
Part of what the IOPC will look at is what was in our minds at that time, what impacted the decisions we made. That's got to run its course. What I would say, and I think where you're going there is, do we have a two-tier type policing system? I would refute that. I would say absolutely not. I see officers day in, day out on the grounds serving without fear or favour all our communities. And I think that's the case nationally. I appreciate other people have a different view, but that's my view.
You don't think policing is anti-white?
No, I don't.
Do you think it's anti-black?
I do not think it is. No, I do not think policing, so be really clear, I do not think policing is racist. There are racist individuals within policing, of course there are, and there have always been, and we will tackle that and deal with it. But it is not any anti-community. My officers that I see day in, day out there are working hard for all our communities from whatever background that they are.
To combat years of concerns over police racism towards ethnic communities, the anti-racism strategy from the National Police Chiefs Council talks of responding to individuals and communities according to their specific needs, circumstances and experiences. It does not mean treating everyone the same or being colourblind. The policing minister criticised this choice of words on Sky News.
Because I guess that feels like it's saying it's OK to not treat everyone equally.
Yeah, and I think it's clumsy, and I think it's right that they're reviewing it.
Is it clumsy or is it wrong?
I think it's not written in the way that it should be, and it's right that it should be reviewed. But I think that shouldn't be taken to mean we need to rip up the whole system.
Yeah.
We don't, but I think this document is wrong.
From the Macpherson Review in 1999 to the Louise Casey Report in 2023, the UK's biggest force, the Metropolitan Police, has been accused of institutional racism. There's been anger at police shootings, at the treatment of black people in custody, at disproportionate use of stop search. For many, the question has never been whether policing is anti-white.
It makes me laugh. And it's a serious thing, and I shouldn't laugh. What does that mean? How can a majority white organisation be anti people that look like them? It's just like I'm going into Nigeria or Jamaica and say the police service or the police force over there is anti-black. It's an absolute, it's a total contradiction. It's foolishness.
The judge summing up in this case said that the officers attending the scene honestly believed that there were reasonable grounds for believing that Henry had committed an offence. And he went on to say that they were given a convincing but wholly false narrative of the incident. He blames the killer for the confusion, not the police training.
The victim's family have made themselves clear. They want a rigorous investigation by the police watchdog. Jason Farrell, Sky News.
Well, as we saw, there was that fiery exchange between the PM and Nigel Farage at PMQs on this issue earlier. John Craig, our chief political correspondent, was watching. John.
Well, it was indeed fiery. The Prime Minister clearly went to Prime Minister's questions ready to attack Nigel Farage. He knew he had a question. There's something called the small parties rota, which means that the parties with 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 MPs get a question once every 6, 7, 8 weeks. So everybody knew Mr Farage had a question. Right at the beginning of the PMQs, the Prime Minister said it was a time for serious work, not rage. Remember that word rage that Mr Farage used yesterday morning. Well, when after the PM had read out what Henry Nowak's father had said after the trial earlier in the week, he quoted him saying, "We do not want his death to be used to create further division, hatred or tension." And he talked about the tragedy being hijacked. Well, then the Speaker called Nigel Farage, and as we've heard, he talked about two-tier policing. Now, you will have spotted, Cathy, behind Mr Farage, 3 Lib Dems heckling him. The Lib Dems, I can tell you, have taken over that back bench where all the Jeremy Corbyn and all the independents used to sit. They put in prayer cards so they'd be there. There were 3 MPs we saw there, Cameron Thomas, Luke Taylor and Danny Chambers, heckling, shouting, shame on you and condemn the violence, a reference to what happened in Southampton last night. But then the Prime Minister, it was clearly prepared because he was looking down at his notes, but it was very powerful, the riposte. I mean, he ended up by saying it was unforgivable what Mr Farage had done. It shows exactly who he is. It was probably one of Sir Keir Starmer's better moments in Prime Minister's questions, clearly prepared. But of course, Mr Farage gets all the publicity for an outburst in Parliament and of course the claims that he's made over the past 24 hours. But the Prime Minister, to be fair, hit back very strongly. I mean, it was all. I remember Tony Blair having a real go at Farage when he was an MEP. It was in the European Parliament in 2005 when Blair said to him, "This is 2005, not 1945. You sit there with the flag of our country's flag. You don't speak. You don't represent our country's interests." Perhaps Sir Keir Starmer is taking perhaps a lesson from Tony Blair on how to deal with Farage. Well, we shall see about that. But certainly it was better from Sir Keir Starmer hitting back. And of course, the Lib Dems helped him a bit by heckling from behind him.
Indeed. John, thanks so much. Well, joining me on the sofa throughout tonight's show are the Labour peer Aisha Hazarika and Conservative peer Kate Fall. Aisha, it's a very ugly political row, isn't it?
It really is. And, you know, our thoughts should primarily be with the family of Henry Nowak for what an absolutely devastating, heartbreaking tragedy. And clearly something went very, very badly wrong with that police response. We've all looked at that body cam footage and it's horrible to watch. And I can't imagine how painful it must be for Henry's mum and dad to see that.
Yeah.
But the idea that now this has been hijacked and seized upon by people who want to basically stir up racial tension and stir up trouble for the police. I think Keir Starmer is absolutely right. I think Hemi Badenoch is also right to call this out. We should be listening to what the family want. And they are saying, do not use the murder of our son to stoke up hatred and division.
So, Kate, Hemi Badenoch's been praised by a lot of people for distancing herself from some of Nigel Farage's rhetoric. Will there be some uneasiness, though, amongst some in the Conservative ranks that she's allowing herself to be outflanked by Nigel Farage? You know, public anger about migration is very real, and there's anger about this issue in policing. He's tapped into something.
Well, look, I think she's taken exactly the right stand. You know, we have a boy in a grieving family, as Aisha says. It's been a terrible day, and the crux of this is about appalling policing. Now, the police, you know, deserve our respect, and we need to trust in them. But what happened was absolutely appalling. And I think it was really interesting to see the sort of sense of unity in the Commons today, until Nigel Farage stood up, and that, you know, that is Kemi doing the right thing, not playing the politics of the moment, not sort of stoking division, and I think she should be really commended for that.
But you know, this is a row that Nigel Farage arguably wanted, and you know, will he end up reaping the rewards from that at the ballot box?
Shame on him if that is what his political strategy is. To feast on the kind of, you know, the memory of dead young people, as he did in Southport with those three girls, you know, Elsie, Baby and Alice. We saw the same kind of tactics being used, and all the people out rioting and causing mayhem. They're not massive supporters of rights for women. Yeah, but they're not out campaigning for women's refuges. Loads of them have got convictions for domestic violence. In the same way here, these people are not... They weren't, by the way, I'd love to see if these people were out protesting for two-tier policing when Sarah Everard was killed by a member of the Metropolitan Police. Or are these people out there, you know, when all these racist messages get released from various police people, are they out saying, oh, it's a two-tier police system? No, they're not. They are weaponising this in the most cynical, dangerous way.
I get your anger, but, you know, there is a big debate that he's tapped into about racism clouding the judgments of people in various different cases, the Nottingham killers, for example, Valdo Callacane, and the grooming gangs, after all, that cast a very long shadow.
Absolutely.
So you know, there is public anger, and he is tapping into that.
There is public anger, and these things have to be looked at, and all of these things are absolutely terrible and wrong, and they need to be looked at. But two things can be true at the same time. A terrible thing can happen, and people can also try and weaponise it for their own political agenda.
There clearly are questions to be asked about what happened. I mean, first of all, whatever the protocols, it was a terrible judgment call the police made in that particular event. Secondly, I think there are questions about the protocol. The Home Secretary has said, you know, equality in front of the law, number one. Then, of course, it makes sense to say you need to take into account specific people and, you know, if someone's in a wheelchair, whatever it is. But I think that does need to be looked at. But what really struck me...
You're talking about the anti-racism guidance.
Yes, I think
we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute.
But I think you know, Aisha makes a good point that two things can be true. It's like, this was a terrible event, what happened. It is absolutely right to find out what happened. Let's look at the codes of what happened. And just finally, you know, the silence of what Farage didn't say in the Commons today really struck me.
Well, he did not condemn the violence. He did not condemn, and that speaks volumes.
Let's talk a little bit more about this in just a second, but I'm joined now by the eminent barrister Michael Mansfield, who represented the family of the murdered teenager Stephen Lawrence. Michael Mansfield, let's just go back in history a little bit, because in a way you can sort of trace what's happening today in this political row back to what happened in the wake of Stephen's tragic death. Just set out the scale of racism in the Met at that time.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned history, because I've been at the bar a long time, and a lot happened well before Stephen's death. As Doreen tried to say in the House of Lords today, namely it's 20 years. Actually, it's more than that. One has to reflect just for a moment for the situation of various areas of metropolitan areas in the United Kingdom where there were people who were very unhappy. There were riots. There was provocative speeches, very similar but rather more articulate, from Enoch Powell, the rivers of blood. We've been here before. What is shocking is that we have not grasped the real nettle here. The equality doesn't mean, I think the Chief Constable of the West Midlands has been right on point today. You don't treat everybody the same. That's the whole point. Farage is wrong in what he's accusing police and others of doing. We have lacked an educational system and a legal system and the rule of law, which is being brought into disrepute by governments throughout at the moment, which means standards are being lowered. But treating communities differently. We are a diverse, integrated nation of many, many different sources. They can't all be treated the same. And what they're trying to do in the West Midlands is, in fact, a historical and educational purpose, so that, in fact, officers, and that's one of the problems, the vetting of officers. Remember, the Met was regarded as and categorised as unfit for purpose only very recently. And so a lot has to do with the selection of who is going to be a police officer and the education of police officers.
Well, let's bring it up to date then. I mean, because Nigel Farage's claim, in essence, is that there was a sort of overcorrection in response to those historical events that you set out, and that now there's actually anti-white prejudice within the police. What's your response to that?
Yes, I think that he's talking nonsense, as usual. And the kind of nonsense that he's talking is dangerous, because people might just for a minute believe what he's saying, just as the Enoch Powell speeches way back then were equally dangerous. And so I don't see what has happened since Lawrence as being any kind of counterbalance. In other words, it's got to overcome the 20 years. The whole point of Lawrence was providing and provoking understanding, providing education, so that in fact you have officers and a nation, because they're only serving a community. Now, if the community is split and divided and governed by rage, I'm afraid you're not going to end up with a police force that understands what it's doing. So in fact, they're provoking a situation which is going to be made worse. I don't see it as anti-white at all.
So you're worried about the consequences of this political row, how it might play out in the streets?
I am very worried about it, yes, because like everybody, I'm a family man. I've got people who live, family who live throughout the country. I see what's happening and I'm worried about it. Ordinary people who are afraid to leave their front doors, and I have many in the Jewish community frightened to leave their front doors and so on. And they're frightened because they're worried that the people who should protect them and come and protect them make very large mistakes. They make policy mistakes. They make mistakes of judgment. We all do that. But in fact, obviously, if you have a trained force that are accustomed to dealing with these situations and different situations, then the pressure is taken off to look for bodies all the time, then I think you begin to get a more civilized situation. But at the moment, my basic concern is that the rule of law has been brought into serious disrepute, and actually we're in a situation where people say what they want and they think there are no repercussions. And Mr. Farage is in that particular category.
But isn't he tapping into public anger? When you look at examples that have been cited, Axel Rudikabana, the Nottingham killer, Valdo Calacane, Surrey Sharif's killers, you look at areas where professionals, well-meaning professionals perhaps, let fear of being accused of being racist cloud their judgment, and that's led to this anger, coupled with immigration that many see as out of control, and that's sort of led to this situation, hasn't it?
Yes, I understand the anger, and in fact, in the job that I've been doing for over 50 years, I'm concerned to ensure that the legitimate criticism of what police get wrong is brought to their attention and they're made accountable where that happens. My concern is this is a much bigger political game that's being played with the police, and if people are encouraged to believe that rage is the answer to this, are gravely mistaken. And I think that we should be encouraging, and I'm afraid the media can often have a responsibility in the way that they report certain items, so that the public are misled into thinking, oh, that was all about that. And the Manchester Airport's a very interesting case where, in fact, snippets of news coloured views. In other words, we want a police force and we want a nation at the same time that are combined in their approach, which is an approach which understands the roots of discontent, rather than that's terrible and we're going to have a violent reaction, because rage leads to violence.
I think we may let you get your earpiece back in while we're chatting to someone in the studio here. Aisha Hazarika is in the studio here and was listening to Doreen Lawrence's intervention. Just tell us, it was very powerful. Just tell us what you drew from it.
Well, she was responding to a lot of attacks from other members of the House of Lords saying, oh, this is all about diversity and inclusion, this is why this has happened and all of this needs to be ripped up. And she made the point that a lot of these policies that people are denigrating now that say they want to be ripped up, it's taken a long time to get them in place because of tragedies and things that families like hers endured, particularly with the murder of her son, Stephen Lawrence. And she said it's taken a long time for families like hers to get justice and to try and get some of that culture change within the police. So she was pushing back with her own very powerful lived experience about what she had gone through.
Let me just go back to Michael Mansfield now. I think we've fixed your earpiece, that's good. That intervention from Doreen Lawrence, have you kept in touch with the Lawrence family over the years on this? You know, it was a really searing moment in British history, wasn't it?
Yes, it was, and it also demonstrated that, you know, if you have an attachment, which she has, and I believe the family, Henry's family, have the same attachment. You have an attachment to truth and the ability to see beyond prejudice, bigotry, hatred, towards a situation in which understanding is nurtured. That's what the Lawrences did. And in particular, may I just emphasise something very rarely gets mentioned. The inquiry was an excellent cauldron, as it were, for, as it were, seeing where the difficulties were. But after the report, a magnificent report, Macpherson report with 77 recommendations, the real point was that Doreen and Neville decided that it was necessary for the politicians, for the police, and for everyone else as well, as regularly, and she got meetings in the Central Hall, Westminster, where she was saying, I want to know what you're doing about this, what you're doing about that, in order to ensure that the legacy is not forgotten. Yeah. Well, and she went on doing that with Neville.
Well, I mean, just, you know, just talking about, picking you up on the point about the legacy not being forgotten. So what do you make of the review of the anti-racism guidance for the police now? Is that the right move? Because there seems to be a bit of cross-party consensus on that. Labour's approves the review of the guidance. You know, the Conservatives have attacked it. What's your thought?
Well, I think the point's actually already been made, so I don't want to labour it too much. But I think it is entirely wrong to go back to the Macpherson report and then policies that have been built carefully around the suggestions that he was making about the future and the legacy of the inquiry that was held, to start dismantling it and attributing what's now happening in these cases to the sort of insidious nature of that advice. I'm against that. I think, in fact, we should be rebuilding what has taken a very long time and a lot of blood, sweat and tears to get to a situation in which there were policies in place which ensured that people did look beyond the immediate crisis that they were looking at. This isn't a question of black on white and all the rest of it.
Michael, just while we've got you there, we're reporting later in the show on the meeting that the Prime Minister hosted with the victims of Mohammed Al-Fayed, the former Harrods boss. You represented him when he was alive. Hundreds of alleged victims. I wondered what you would say to them about the fact that they didn't get justice while he was alive, and they're now fighting to ensure, you know, that there's a police investigation ongoing into the people who may have facilitated him.
I would say to them what I say to all the people I represent who are victims of injustice. And there's another report out today, the Spring Hill massacre in Belfast, where the Prime Minister has apologised. I said to those families, never, and that is the whole point of what I'm trying to say, is you must never, the people, the citizens, must never give up, not express their feelings in terms of rage, but to express their feelings in relation to the possibility of a constructive future rather than a destructive future. So I say to those victims, you persevere for the justice you deserve. That is my message always.
Michael Mansfield, pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you very much.
That's okay.
Well, I mean, that's a clarion call at the end of that. Kate, let me put that to you first of all. Just the idea that, you know, victims, whether it's victims of racism or abuse, should never give up and don't give up on the legacy. What's your thought?
I totally, I mean, I thought it was an excellent and powerful point about not going after rage. And actually that word rage, I think, really stayed with me this week. Is that really the message you want to sort of send to the country? I don't think it's good for the country. I don't think good for the victim. So it's interesting what Michael said. But I also want to pick up on something he was saying about the guidance here. So we don't know whether that played into what happened with the police. I can't imagine what guidance would lead to such sort of poor policing like that. But I do think, you know, the application of these guidance should be looked at. I mean, if we feel like it needs looking at, there's no reason why that, you know, after a couple of years, you know, police shouldn't be sort of saying, did that work? Is it actually worked on the ground? And I'm sorry I missed Doreen Lawrence's comments today, but I think very powerful that she spoke out today in memory of her son.
Well, Aisha, and just to reflect on what Michael was saying, I mean, very powerful on his reaction to Nigel Farage's comments and the danger that he sees in what's happening. Your thoughts?
I think it is a really dangerous time. I think people feel really frightened about how polarised and how divided our society as well. I think social media has got a huge amount to play, and I'm sure each and every one of us will get lots of abusive messages after we come off air tonight. We are in a society...
I had a deluge overnight.
Yeah, I've had it as well, you know, and sadly, we are in a very, very difficult moment where there are difficult issues and we must not shy away from them, whether it is things like the grooming gangs, what happened in Southport, all of those things, this terrible killing, misogyny as well. Lots of women feel there's I mean, look at that terrible case we were discussing last week about those teenage boys who raped the girl and filmed it, and they didn't even get custodial sentences. So there's a lot of people who feel like policing doesn't work for them and the criminal justice system doesn't work for them. But what do you do? How do you fix that? Do you come together? Do you try and challenge the systems? Do you try and change it through campaigning and legislation? Or do you set fire to a wheelie bin and try and attack people and abuse people on social media? It's like, you know, which route are you going to pick?
And just brief thought on the police racism, anti-racism guidance. I mean, is it right that, you know, Michael Mansfield really making the point that, you know, that came out of many years of careful work?
It did, and I feel very personally involved. One of my first jobs was actually being a press officer working at the Home Office when the Macpherson report came out all those years ago, and actually helped look after the Lawrence family on the day. I was a very young press officer. So, and I think that was such an important watershed moment for race relations, the coinage of the phrase, which I know lots of people don't like and people push back against it, but institutionalised racism, kind of systemic and structural racism. Should it be looked at again? I think there's no harm in looking at it again. I think all guidance does need to evolve as things move on. So I think it's definitely worth revisiting. So I don't think we should be ideological about that. But what I do not want to see is a kind of ripping up this idea that, you know, that the police have swung. You know, the police get it wrong a lot of the time, and we must have policing by consent. And I mentioned Sarah Everard. Lots of women don't feel like they have trust in the police process and the criminal justice system. But also, the police do an amazing job. None of us... You look at what happened in Golders Green when the police ran towards danger. Exactly. They stopped that man, that horrible, evil man who was anti-Semitic man who was out trying to stab Jewish people. And they got criticism then from other people saying, oh, they're being too heavy-handed. So a lot of the time, they are in really difficult positions and they put themselves in harm's way in a way that none of us would want to do.
Kate, there's been an apology from the Southampton Chief Constable. Do you think he should quit?
Look, I don't really like... This is a serious issue that deserves real, you know, observation and real discussion. I don't really like, oh, let's... I mean, what's the point? What's that going to... It's not going to help the family. It's not going to help the grieving friends. But I do think we need to know what went on here. Was it just a bad police judgment at the time? Was it bigger than that? Do we need to look at the guidance? All of that really matters because, as Aisha said, we need to trust our police. We need to be behind them as a society. And if we lose trust, then that's bad for everyone.
Well, now, if you're an average phone user, you'll spend nearly 5 years of your life aimlessly scrolling through your mobile. That's according to research published today, which found around an hour and a half of phone use every day has no clear purpose. Pretty scary stat that Scary Spice is taking on. What Mel B really wants you to do is put that phone down, and she's developed an app to help you do just that. She came into the studio to tell me all about it. Mel B, people are going to be getting a message from you, a pre-recorded message, telling them to get off their phones.
Yeah.
Are you sort of channeling the Scary Spice here, or are you a bit friendlier?
I mean, it's a bit of both, really. I mean, my main point was, teaming up with O2, is to get people off their phones. You know, I've got 3 kids. The age range of my kids are from 14 to 27. And we'll be sitting at the dinner table and they're just going down a rabbit hole. And I just thought, what can I do to kind of make my kids more present? And then, you know, I look at myself and how I handle my phone. And just this idea of the app came up. You can get it on my Instagram, on my bio. You just download it to WhatsApp and you set a timer like you would a regular timer, whether it be for every 45 minutes, every couple of hours. And basically, I will be calling you saying, right, stop, take a breather, put your phone down.
Yeah.
And, you know, and one of the main reasons why there's so many statistics out there right now, you know, 74% of us are getting mentally affected by just doom scrolling. We end up scrolling per day, I think it's like an hour and 26 minutes. Half the time we don't even know why we're scrolling, but we're just scrolling.
And do you find that, has that affected you as well, personally?
Well, I'm quite good now because I live on a farm. So, you know...
That's the answer, to live on a farm.
I think so. Back when we were kind of touring all over the world, when I was in my teens, you know, we didn't have social media.
Yeah.
Whereas now we do, and I'm seeing the impact that it's having. People are losing sleep, they're getting anxiety. And if we just took a break from our phones, and even though we say it to ourselves, right, today I'm not going to be on my phone this much, we can't help it. The algorithms are sucking us in. And so this is kind of a fun, kind of healthy way to just put down your phone, because I know there are going to be campaigns out there that are campaigning right now to get the age limit kind of lowered for social media.
Well, I was going to ask you about that. I mean, you know, the government's now considering a ban for social media for under 16s.
But God knows how long that could take.
Right, would you want them to get a move on?
Well, I'm thinking in the meantime, get this app, because it will literally stop you. I mean, some of my voices are a little bit assertive, some of them are a little bit softer, but it's basically saying just be present for just a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
And the benefit that it will have on you will be just so much more healthier. And it is calculated by the time we're 70, we're going to lose nearly 5 years to being on our phone. Who wants to do that? Who wants to be that statistic?
Do you find it hard, given you've got such large social media followings, do you find it hard to sort of detox, to have a few days, weeks away from a particular app?
Well, I'm the kind of person that always either misplaces a phone or loses a phone. I've always been that person. And so now I'm finding it quite handy, because I could have been one of those people addicted to it. I mean, I do my own social media, so I do get to see, you know, the comments. Some of them, well, a lot of them are not nice. Some of them are really positive and nice, but I don't let it affect me. But for some other people, it does affect them. It can ruin their day.
I wonder if you think that social media companies generally are too powerful, because when you look at the fact, I looked at the figures just a minute ago.
I think that's also our fault, because we've embraced it. Because I remember when Twitter first came out and when Instagram first came out, everybody was like, oh my God, it's a new way to kind of socialise with the fans and promote things. And I mean, I think things started off in a very innocent way. Just like anything, it's got kind of clouded and overshadowed by everything else that's now a part of it.
And it's become quite toxic. But I mean, if you look at it, 3 social media companies have been fined in the UK because of misusing children's data and age checks and so on. None of them have paid that fine. So, I mean, the watchdogs are sort of powerless to take them to task, aren't they? They're just so vast.
Well, I think it's just got so widespread and out of control. It's like everything's been up for grabs, and now it's turned, like you said, toxic. And there's people that are seriously getting affected by it. And it just basically is. I think you have to be quite responsible for yourself, which sometimes is hard, especially if you've got your algorithm saying, right, you were talking about sofas, and now you can buy a half-price sofa. That can become really addictive. And a lot of people, from the research and the statistics out there, they don't even know what they're doing, but they know that it's like addictive, and that's playing into, you know, your mental health is everything, especially since it's been Mental Health Week. Was it last week and this week? You know, so I think it's really important for us to take responsibility and take care of ourselves. And that, as a parent, you know, help out with your kids, make your kids more involved and more present.
But is that
especially
letting the
at
tech
dinner
companies
time.
off the hook, though? You know, putting the burden on the parents and the kids?
Well, I think as a parent, I've got responsibility to my kids. You know, luckily, when I had my kids when they were younger, it wasn't such a social media thing.
Yeah.
It wasn't a thing about giving your kid a phone, where it is now. You know, thankfully, I wasn't part of that. I am now, and I've got a 14-year-old. And I do limit her phone time, but because I'm that kind of parent, she abides by it.
You're a campaigner for women's aid, so let me just ask you about that finally.
For survivors of domestic abuse.
For survivors, exactly. Yeah. The Prime Minister's hosting a meeting for survivors of abuse by the former Harrods boss, Mohammed Al-Fayed, today. A lot of them feel they've been ignored by the government, and I just wonder what you think. The government's got this target of halving violence against women and girls in a decade.
Well, can I just say there's still 3 women a week that get killed by their former partner and current partner. I was in an abusive relationship for 10 years. I managed to get out. Thankfully, I had support from my friends and my family, even though I'd been isolated from them for 10 years because of the abuse that I was in, thinking that I could not leave.
I should just add
not
that your
many people,
former husband
I don't
denies
want to say
the
that.
abuse.
I don't want to say that because you can't deny that. Not many people are in that situation where they can actually reach out for help or even have access to their phone. So for me, the judicial system, the justice system needs to be completely wiped clean and needs to be started from scratch, from the inside out with new laws that actually support and believe survivors like me. I have a massive problem with the way that the family courts are, the way that the courts are with women that are brave enough to come forward with what's happened to them. You know, abuse is not going to go away, and abuse has no gender, it has no colour, it has no boundaries. Abuse can happen to anyone, and I've actually experienced it for 10 years, so I'm speaking from my own experience and from my experience of dealing with survivors. And it does choke me up a little bit, even still we're talking about this, because nothing is moving quick enough, nothing is moving fast enough. It's just like, and we have to take baby steps, I know, but even if you read the news now, things are happening that just should not be happening.
Well, Aisha and Kate are on the sofa tonight. Let's just go back to the start of her conversation. She was talking about people scrolling on social media constantly, and all 3 of us were sitting there on our phones scrolling.
We were like, what?
It's really problematic, isn't it?
We're all addicted. I think she makes some really powerful points. There's a big debate happening in Parliament, which Kate and I have been heavily involved in terms of whether the government should ban under 16s. I think over 16s. I think
she did
adults,
talk about that, by the way, but you were busy scrolling.
Yeah,
at the time.
but she made. I did pick up on the one thing she said about how we can just waste hours of the day. I mean, I'm totally guilty of that. You're definitely guilty of that.
Oh God, totally.
But I think it's like rotting all of our brains. I think it's really bad. I think this country's productivity would shoot up if we could just block us all from the
Kate,
phones
are you any better at this than Aisha and I? Because we've clearly got a problem.
Well, I think we should all go and move to the farm, by the way. That sounds like an absolute
That sounds good.
I mean, look, I think I'm slightly in a better position because when I was at Number 10, we weren't allowed to go on social media, and that was actually almost 10 years ago. But I never really went back, and I never did X and everything. But
and no disappearing WhatsApps, I'm assuming.
Of course.
So you haven't had the joy of all the death threats and all the abuse that Cathy and I get on a regular basis.
But I do spend too much time on my phone, and I know when I do it, when I set myself the test, can I pick up a book and read a couple of pages without checking my phone? And it's terrifying, the result of that. So,
but I feel so much better having read a few pages of a book rather than, you know...
The thing that I like to do to get myself off the phone is go to the theatre.
I thought you were going to say go to the loo.
No, go
Just leave the
No, you can take your phone to the loo. What are you talking about, Cathy?
You really do have a problem.
Go to the theatre, because then you can't. It's totally frowned upon, rightly
except
so.
Rosamund Pike had
yeah,
a go.
Rightly so. She had to go at a person. I would never get my phone. You know, I'd feel really guilty. I'm sure people would be like, shh. So that's the only way to stop it.
Yeah.
It is a nightmare. At the first, you're like, don't look.
You do have withdrawal. It's like with the book test as well. You do sort of sit there and go, oh, I'll just have a look.
Because it's addictive.
And it's real time. It's that sense you always have to sort of reply to someone. Then WhatsApp, they can see when you've seen the message, and then you feel there's a sort of a clock waiting for your reply.
I've always wondered why you took so long, actually.
But it's the infinite scroll on Instagram where you're like, oh, I'll just pop on Instagram for like 5 minutes, literally an hour later, and all you've been watching
cat videos.
is someone trying to open a bottle of beer with a cucumber and like menopausal women
That's
trying
possible, apparently.
It is. I know. I've actually got my algorithm says so, definitely. Or loads of women, people trying to sell you creatine.
But serious point. You know, should it be banned? Because, or is that just letting the tech companies off the hook for under 16s?
I think it's everything in the arsenal. I personally would ban it, but I wouldn't just stop at that. I would also put much more pressure on the tech companies.
Yeah, so I think that's true. I think just the ban without them taking responsibility. My one worry is, you know, the grown-up person post-16 is going to have to live in a world with social media and look at us all talking about how much time we spend on it. So I think you do need to educate. So a ban and then they, you know, go behind. We hear in Australia everyone sort of cheats on it and everything. So I do think you need education, try and stop it in the schools.
Right. More to discuss in just a moment. But just to remind you, we have got a special edition of the UK Tonight coming up after us, live from Coventry Hospital. Sarah Jane Mee will be with us at 8 o'clock this evening, right here on Sky News. Now, since his death almost 3 years ago, more than 400 allegations of sexual misconduct have been made against Mohammed Al-Fayed, the former owner of Harrods. Today, a group of survivors held a virtual meeting with Sir Keir Starmer in what they hope will prove to be a landmark moment for justice. I spoke to some of them after that meeting to find out how it went. Women who say they were abused by the former Harrods boss, Mohammed Al-Fayed, are in there meeting the Prime Minister right now. It's taken them ages to get this meeting, and there's a lot of anger, actually, about how long it's taken. So I'm going to talk to them and see if they're pleased with how it went or if they think it was a bit of a PR stunt for the Prime Minister. Well, Chantal, let me begin with you. Tell me how the meeting went and if you were happy with what you heard from the Prime Minister.
I was pleasantly surprised. I thought he came across as caring and very humble, and he seemed really interested to take our case forward. My only disappointment was the fact that he put the request for a statutory public inquiry to the side a little bit, and that's something that I've been requesting for 2 years. I have made 2 deliveries to Downing Street in May last year and again 2 weeks ago to request a statutory public inquiry, and I hope that this is something that he will still consider very severely.
Rachel, how important a moment is this? Because this is the first time that a Prime Minister has hosted a meeting of this nature, isn't it? Did that feel like a big step to you?
It did feel like a big step, and we are very, very grateful. And also with the acknowledgement about the scale and breadth of the abuse. He apologized for that, which was really, really nice to hear after 2 years of silence.
Helen, because you reported to the police in 2017, do you have any confidence that they will conduct this current investigation thoroughly?
There is evidence that shows that they're just continuing to fail us. And I think without oversight, we're never going to get to the truth of it. And the thing that I didn't hear from the Prime Minister is the urgency for us.
I just wondered if you could just, in a couple of sentences, each of you just reflect on the long-lasting impact of what you experienced at the hands of Mohammed Al-Fayed. Shanta first.
What happened to me happened in 1994, and it's something that I've had to put in a little black box and lock away for over 3 decades. And I haven't shared that experience with so many people, but it has impacted my life in some of the most profound ways. It's impacted my family. It's impacted the manner in which I've approached my jobs, because I've just lost a lot of self-confidence. I've been petrified to be in rooms on my own with people in seniority. It's had a profound impact, and I'm just glad that now I'm able to heal a little bit and move forward.
I think sometimes the public thinks it was just that moment that has the impact. I unlike Shanta, my coping mechanism has been to speak about this nonstop, which means that everybody who knows me has had their ears like bored off by me telling this story over and over again as I processed it. The impact of what happened in 2008, though, to me, it's tied to what happened to me in 2017 and again in 2023. Nothing compares to realizing that the faces on this call all also experience the same thing.
I think the impact of what happened to us is still yet to be fully revealed. It's a lifelong sentence. One moment in time is a lifelong sentence.
The people who convened the meeting with the Prime Minister have just come out, so I'm just going to have a chat with them about how it went. Lucy, how was the meeting?
It was a really positive meeting, I think, to hear the Prime Minister and Minister Fleet say that they are going to commit government resources and give this the gravitas it deserves.
Wendy, do you have any confidence that survivors will get justice after all of this time? You know, when many of them have been to the police, reported to the police and haven't got anywhere with it, do you think they're going to get justice?
I mean, I have to be honest, that has been one of the things that we've heard consistently from survivors who've engaged with the all-party parliamentary group, is that confidence in the ongoing police investigation. And so it was very good to have the Prime Minister talk about that today and to say that nobody is above the law.
How are you going to make sure that the Prime Minister is going to do what he said in that behind those closed doors?
So the Prime Minister has committed there to regular updates, and I think that's really important. When we've been working for coming on 6 months now to try and establish that level of trust with survivors, making sure that we keep people up to date, making sure that we're having those regular touch points has been essential for us as an all-party group. And I think the Prime Minister's made that commitment, and it's something we need to make sure continues so that survivors have got that trust in what's happening at a government level.
I got a real sense from the survivors on that call with the Prime Minister that they were really relieved that he'd had the meeting. It was a historic meeting, but also frustration too, that they weren't in the room face to face. They weren't able to ask those questions directly, but a huge determination given the scale of the alleged abuse. They're not going to let the Prime Minister off the hook on this. They want justice in whatever form they can, given that Mohammed Al-Fayed himself is dead. Well, Harrods gave us the following statement. Recognising the remarkable bravery of those who've come forward, Harrods continues to support survivors of the despicable sexual abuse perpetrated by Fayed and welcomes any and all progress in the pursuit of justice. Well, Aisha and Kate are on the sofa with me today. And it's pretty historic, isn't it, for a serving Prime Minister to host a meeting with survivors of abuse?
Absolutely, and I know that many of these victims of Mohammed Al-Fayed have been campaigning so hard to get their voices heard by senior politicians, so this was a very good thing to have happened. But it's what happens next and the speed with which. I think certainly the victims I've spoken to have made the point, it wasn't just one man. It's like a bit like the Jeffrey Epstein situation in America. We often thought it's just what you don't get to carry out this number of crimes just by yourself. There will have been people who knew about this, who supported him, who aided and abetted him.
And that's being investigated by the police right now.
Get to the bottom of it all.
Kate, I mean, you know, you've worked in Number 10. It's a big thing for a Prime Minister to meet survivors in this way, isn't it? Even though they weren't allowed to ask direct questions and they weren't there in person.
Well, exactly. No, it definitely wasn't. And you see, you know, Keir Starmer, this is the best of him. You know, he's reaching out. He's on firm ground. And it sounded like the meeting really meant, you know, so much to those people. And it is just the extent of the people involved, the number of survivors, the length of time it went on, and the idea that there were the sort of ecosystem around that made that possible is really astonishing. And it's a terrible story, yes.
Yeah, and you know, as Michael Mansfield was reflecting, you know, they're just to keep going and to keep, and that takes energy.
Absolutely, I think people don't realise the kind of emotional labour and the toll, the psychological toll. And actually, what is so tragic is that many women and others who have been abused, it's such a heavy burden to carry. It takes a great shapes. It clouds the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
Oh, you look in Virginia Giuffre's situation, she ended up taking her own life.
I mean, see this in the context of Keir Starmer's pledge to halve violence against women and girls in a decade. I mean, he might not be around for much longer. It's a big challenge and, you know, you're sceptical about whether he can meet it. Briefly.
Well, I think he will do his best, and I think we don't know what's going to happen, but if it's him, I'm sure he'll keep the pace up, and if it's someone else, I'm sure they'll stay committed to it as well.
Okay, we just need to keep on pushing back. Misogyny online, we were talking about online, it's getting worse, not better.
That's the new frontier, really, isn't it?
The bravery of the women, that's what we need to remember. We just need to count on that and keep going.
In a sentence, is it going backwards for women?
I think, sadly, it is at the moment, and I think social media plays a huge part in that.
Thank you both. You've been absolutely great. Thank you for joining me on the sofa. But that is it for tonight. See you again tomorrow at 7 p.m. Goodbye.